Coming up on this week's show, Indecent Communication, bumper stickers, that pesky mono to poly transition, how the hell do you do it? Swinging versus polyamory, and do you feel lucky? Hello, and welcome to Polyamory Weekly for August 9th, 2005. This is Tales from the Front of Responsible Non-Monogamy from a pansexual, kink-friendly point of view. And for our under 18 listeners, guys, this is an adult-oriented podcast about really lascivious things like communication and honesty in relationships. So if you're under 18 and looking for upfront advice and answers to questions about sex, visit www.scarleteen.com. And hi guys, I'm your host, Minx. Had to get all those disclaimers and descriptions out of the way. Speaking of Polyweekly being from a kink-friendly point of view, I am so excited. Ohio Leatherfest coming up in fewer than 10 days. I'm really excited because it looks like Grey Dancer and I might actually have found someone to share a room with finally last minute. So, whew, so that Minx's credit card doesn't get all hot from all the action. I'm also excited because the speaker roster there is incredible. Dossie Easton, Catherine List, Janet Hardy, all huge, long-time polyamorous authors. And my only hope is that I can actually get a chance to, talk to them like people and fellow polyamorous instead of what I'm afraid of is that either they'll be so busy doing their thing that I won't get to talk to them at all, or that I will try to talk to them and my mouth will open and close and babble something really incoherent and I'll come across sounding like some childish raving fan. I do suspect that in real life they're probably very approachable, but there's just always that fear. So hoping that I can have a talk and either report it back to you or maybe even get an interview with them at Ohio Leatherfest. We'll see. All right, moving on. And speaking of getting out there, guys, we got our first mention in the mainstream press. Yep, that's right. Polyamory Weekly was mentioned on CNET, mainstream press. Now, granted, most of the article was actually more about Violet Blue, who seems to be the one that all these people who are worried about, oh my gosh, there's porn on the internet. Suddenly they're worried that, kids are going to be able to have access to porn on the internet because it wasn't there before. Anyway, yep, and the link will be in the show notes, which, by the way, will be available at www.livejournal.com/users/polyweekly. Probably a good point to insert here. If you ever have any questions, comments, or want to contact the Minx about anything at all, email me at cunningminx, CUNNINGMINX, @gmail.com. You can also always call the listener comment line. It's getting kind of dusty. Nobody's calling the comment line. But if you want to, area code 206-600-5677. So this article on CNET that from July 27th, the title, I love the title because it's alliterative. Porn purveyors push prurient podcasts. Just a month ago, Alex Nesbitt of Digital Podcast claimed a large market was being left unfulfilled by podcasters. While erotica ranked as the #1 category viewed by podcast listeners, sex-related shows made up less than 1% of podcast listings. But from the look of things, that market won't be left out in the cold for long. Naughty podcasts like Violet Blue's Open Source Sex, the ever-popular Dawn and Drew Show, Polyamory Weekly, and the Smut Podcast are popping up faster than listeners can say RSS feed. I find it really incredible that that one episode 15 where I said cock and fuck a lot and talked about a threesome, but apart from that, I really don't think I deserve to be with all the real good smut. I mean, Violet Blue has a fabulous podcast, and it really actually is about kinky sex. Well, I'm thinking, okay, I've got an idea. I'm thinking that what we need to do, if anybody out there writes erotica, I think we need to have several segments devoted to polyamorous erotica so I can actually earn this smutty, naughty label that people are giving us. Because really, Polyamory Weekly, not terribly smutty right now. So let's smut it up. If you guys write erotica, anybody out there write erotica, doesn't mind, and if you don't mind it being read on the air, send it in to me. We'll get some really good polyamorous smut out there on the airwaves. Woo! But at the end of the article, it is the same concern as always. She writes, Apple has yet to clearly define what it deems indecent material. For now, this genre of podcast exists in a gray area, leaving listeners and parents of young users to hope that podcasting aggregators' policies align with their own personal ideas of what's just a little too naughty to be aired freely. Pardon me while I chuckle a little bit. Actually, I thought the article was reasonably fair, although I do want to give props and special thanks to Amy Guerin of Contentious Blog for questioning the prurient label, in particular for Polyamory Weekly. I don't actually listen to the Dawn and Drew show myself, don't really have that much of an interest in it, but, and of course I do listen to Violet Blue's Open Source Sex and highly recommend it. But as she pointed out, Polyamory Weekly, prurient, most of the time we're pretty boring. We're talking about relationships and communication, and she actually made a very intelligent and well-informed comment. And then someone else commented back blaming polyamorist for bringing AIDS and spreading AIDS around the world. So, to whoever made that incredibly intelligent and well-informed comment, fuck you. That's my incredibly intelligent and well-informed comment back. No, I actually, I'm not one for engaging in battles online, so I simply posted a link to Polyamory Weekly for those who are wondering what the content of the show actually was, and left it at that without further comment. I'm not terribly confrontational online. But that being said, my little rant about the CDA last week engendered quite a bit of viewer mail, or listener mail, and I'm really glad that it did, because I can read your rants so I don't have to come up with my own rant. Oh, first, I did want to mention briefly, Violet Blue of Open Source Sex did mention on her podcast this week that the same sort of issue about the CDA, and she used a wonderful phrase to describe sex-oriented podcasting, and she said it's democratic sex ed. It's democratic sexual education. And I thought, how wonderful, because it's true. If you don't want to listen to it, you don't listen to it. It's not like, if you accidentally click on a website and you can suddenly see something that offends you, you actually have to download a podcast. You actually have to read the description, wait for a 10 or 20 meg file to download, take, a half hour, 45 minutes, or an hour to actually listen to it. And if you don't like it, you don't subscribe. You find something else that is in line with your beliefs. So I really like her phrase, the word she chose, democratic. I think that's very accurate, so kudos to her. But Miss Lala also wrote in and said, Hi Minx, just wanted to say your show is awesome. Now that I have preliminaries out of the way, I want to say how irritated I am about Bush's Communications Decency Act. I feel that because Bush really has less control in the country than he'd like to have, this is just another way for him to cater to fundamentalists on one issue or another. I want to know where the First Amendment is hiding in all this fluff. I think that people should be smart enough to stay away from things that they know offend them, and if they aren't, that's their own fault, not yours. There is always going to be something that offends some. I mean, it's just like our sexual harassment training at work. They say all it takes is for one person to be offended. What the fuck is that? People can find any way to be offended by anything. You know what, Miss Lala? That really offends me that you said that. Yeah. It's a subjective matter, and I feel that if our First Amendment rights cannot protect us from a fundy president, then where are we to turn as those socially stigmatized and scrutinized by those who don't accept our lifestyle? It never fails that once educational material about a subject matter isn't controlled by someone who can taint it, that they will find a way to censor and otherwise convolute the real meaning in a thing. Basically, what they are saying with this, in my opinion, is that discussion of the topic should be out of bounds because it's not accepted by them when more people are poly, or insert other lifestyle choice here, than they might want to think. I may be new to the lifestyle, but I'm not only a pagan, but also living with herpes, so I have enough stigma attached to myself as it is. I really don't want something so good as this podcast to be shut down because some fundy or even spiteful individual decides they don't like the content because it's not acceptable to them. Half the problem with lack of acceptance is lack of understanding, and I think that makes living a loving lifestyle, albeit different from the norm, harder to live. Seethe, she says. Keep strong. You seem to have a large support base at the moment. All I can say is I hope that the gods see fit to balance the scales soon. There are some things that should not be censored. Education, a stepping stone to a better society, can only be properly conveyed if all of the information is in fact available to those seeking it. Unless you're under 18, of course. When we place a cap on the contents of a container because it doesn't fit our mold, that's when we will fail. Just keep your head up. We're rooting for you. Well, thanks very much. And I think, to me, Miss Lala, the most resonant thing that you said is that people wanting to shut something down, even though it's educational, that they think discussion of a topic should be out of bounds because the topic isn't accepted by them. And this is something that I think as poly people we've had to learn. You have to learn more about accepting other people's lifestyles if you want people to accept yours. But I'm all for that. There's no reason that we shouldn't be able to dialogue, to talk about something, even with people who disagree with us. Unless, of course, they're making really stupid comments online. I'm sorry, I'm going to stop being childish soon. Really, I am. Jack, also wrote in and said, been listening to your show for a while now. Granted, I started when iTunes went podcasting, so there were already 8 to 10 shows there. Now I'm hooked and strung out till the next. Stroke, he says. You struck a chord with me on your August 2nd podcast on the use of the word decency. Or is it me, or does it sound capitalized? Decency. Ugh. It's all about perception. Begin rant. Here's an idea. Just an idea, mind you. Something does not become indecent, obscene, or vulgar until someone perceives it that way. The CDA should keep this in mind. The words cock and fuck, when uttered several times during your well-deserved, well-listened to podcast about Shadow Find and Fencer T. Okay, I listened to it a few times myself, but I never said I wasn't a pervert. Grin. Oops, digressed. My point. If the word cock passed your lips, thud. You said lips. It wasn't indecent, obscene, or vulgar until someone perceives it that way. So I propose that, if such was the case, our lovely minx did not have her ass tossed in jail, but tossed the ass of the person who found it indecent in jail. After all, he had the dirty thought. You just had fun. End rant. Well, I kind of like that idea. Sort of it takes a pervert to spot a pervert. And I think this is the issue with the whole Communications Decency Act legislation, is that you can't legislate decency because what they're trying to say is that if one person finds it indecent, even though there's obviously an entire community of, 600 to 1,000 people downloading the show every week, obviously those people don't think it's indecent or they wouldn't be listening to it. Or maybe you are listening to it because you do think it's indecent. Anyway, now I digress. Of course, there are going to be people who think that it's not decent and they don't need to listen to it. I personally think that Rush Limbaugh is indecent. I think that stupidity and intolerance are indecent. Does that mean that I can shut down everyone who says something stupid or intolerant? Or can I just poke at Rush Limbaugh? Would that be fun? Anyway, yeah, there really aren't any teeth in this amendment. I really don't see how this Communications Decency Act, I don't see how you can, what do? Take a poll? If more people than others find it indecent, then sites can be shut down. It doesn't make any sense to me. And, I'm with you guys. If you think it's indecent, hey, don't listen to it. Turn off your iPod. You're not going to accidentally find this podcast. Okay, Brent writes in, says, just listen to your August 2nd Polyweekly podcast. More strokes, more Attagirls. I'm honestly surprised that your listenership is only around 1,000. You do quality work. In reference, your comments on politics and the CDA issue that you spoke briefly of in between cute minx growls. See, I'm trying to be all tough, I'm trying to be angry, and I'm cute. This must be why Master Grey Dancer has no problem beating me horribly, because obviously I'm cute when I'm upset. More digression. Brent continues, you might want to also direct your listeners to other organizations that have a history of fighting censorship on the internet. Of course, Brent, these links will be provided. The Electronic Frontier Foundation at www.eff.org. The Electronic Privacy Information Center, www.epic.org, that's epic.org. And, of course, let's not forget the American Civil Liberties Union. Remember those civil liberties? We used to have them. www.aclu.org. He writes, keep up the good work. I know you don't want to spend time talking about political issues on a show devoted to relationships, as it's way off topic, but the only way we're going to be able to roll back these intrusions on our freedom to live and love how we please is through education. As the bumper sticker says, if you aren't outraged, you aren't paying attention. I'm with you there. And to finish up our series of political rants on a lighter note, Takanami wrote in and with a cute little bit about freedom of speech or freedom of sheep. I won't read the whole thing. He says, it's a shame that some people are smart enough to turn on the computer and surf, but not smart enough to click somewhere else when they're offended. I personally am offended by many of sites, but have the understanding that I have the personal responsibility to click somewhere else instead of bowing till the shepherd shows up. And he says, freedom of speech is knowing you have the right to speak your mind, even if it's offensive. Freedom of sheep is being able to say, bah. All right, those are all the sound effects I'm doing, and I'm not going to read the whole list. But for those political enough to feel like making a statement about polyamory on your car, I'm very excited that Tacit, who is the creator of the Zero Mag site, www.xeromag.com, great poly resources there. He has a new bumper sticker, poly-friendly, available in his Cafe Press store. And the bumper sticker says, and it was a reaction, he said, to the marriage equals man plus woman bumper stickers that some of the right-wing conservative religious groups have been handing out. So he came up with a poly-friendly bumper sticker that says marriage equals, and he's got it's hard to describe, but he's got a circle of, like the little bathroom logos of people, little man, little woman. Well, there's like a little woman plus a man plus a woman plus a woman plus a man plus a man. Ooh, it's a thinker if you don't know what it means. But I invite you to go to his Cafe Press store, which is available at www.cafepress.com/alternative life, ALTERNATIVELIFE.com. Now, in addition to the new polyamory-friendly bumper sticker, he also has the Hot Buy Babe women's tank top, which I'm really, really tempted to get. And he also has a lovely Poly Dragon mouse pad and wall clock with a nice Poly Infinity logo with sort of a tribal dragon tattoo and a heart in it. Very, very cool. And as it turns out, 2 of the emails that came in this week had to do with making the transition from being monogamous to switching over and being poly. So first email was from Jay, who first of all wrote in and said, wanted to let you know you might be seeing the extra hits on the June 28th show of Polyamory Weekly, because Podcast Alley still has that show as the latest one, and I found Podcast Alley near the top of a Google search. And he also points out the description still says cocks and fucking and cocks and whatnot, so that could be why. But with that note, he continues, I was searching for something on issues of sexual monogamy versus poly. I've been monogamous all my life, and being pagan, I've had a lot of very close friendships with many women, but only had one lover at a time. So when I found a great woman, I married her, and it's been a good marriage until the last 3 of the 12 years. Congratulations, by the way, on being married for 12 years. The problem now seems to be that we have met some women who've been a lot of fun to have around, being pagan, nudity and flirting abound, and somehow my wife has become scared of being replaced or that I don't love her anymore. After much counseling, she has accepted that I do not want to leave her, and she believes that I will be happier if I can have sex with some of these new friends. I'm in a bind because I don't think my wife is really okay with this. Anyhow, I haven't got to your second podcast on monogamy and commitment yet, and maybe that will help. I also wonder if maybe I was always poly but never found more than one right person at a time. I've always been very selective with my sexual partners, and being a geek, it was also hard to find women interested in me. Now I'm 40 and I'm finding a new me with how I dress and act, and I now get many compliments and much more flirtation, and finding there are many women who I really care about and I would say that I love. But keeping my marriage seems to prevent me from expressing these feelings. Sigh. I just want everyone to be happy. I'm hoping I can find a way, or at least get better with the issues of maintaining a poly relationship with these different personalities and concerns. So, Jay, I wrote back and said, well, first with the disclaimer, I personally have not had to go through that transition. Great Answer is really a better person to answer this question, and probably some listeners out there are shaking or nodding their heads and thinking, oh yes, we went through this too, because I know that for Great Answer, the transition from monogamy to polyamory within an existing marriage or relationship is incredibly treacherous. I mean, first of all, if you're the person bringing it up, I know that he was terrified of bringing up to his fiancée that he really believed that at his heart he was poly and that he needed to see other people. And he was terrified. He thought he was going to lose her. And to her credit and to his, they stayed together and talk things out, but they went through a couple of rocky years also where they tried being poly. They made up a lot of rules. They went to all these resources. They did things that they thought were poly, but then decided, no, what, that's not really what poly is for us. And it was really difficult, and it is really, really scary. And while I haven't personally been on that end of it, I really feel for you, because how terrifying is it to be the one that comes into the relationship and says, I know we've been together for 8, 9 years, but here, let me just reach in and grab all of your insecurities and rip them out and shine a big bright light on them. Won't that be fun? Yeah, no, definitely it's not fun. I personally think the best you can do is be willing to talk about it and be willing to accept that your relationship may change forever, or that it may not change, that you may decide that the best thing is to stay monogamous, and that you either keep your polyamory under control, that you talk about it, go to therapy, maybe find another outlet for it. But I think it's really important to recognize that there are many possible outcomes, and that it's not you forcing someone else to be comfortable with your lifestyle. Oh, this also brings to mind, I had 2 friends that this happened to. They were married for quite a while, and it was actually the wife who got into pagan circles and, more with the naked and the flirting and she actually ended up finding a person within the circle that she really very much wanted to be with. And so she came to her husband and said, I think we need to be poly. I want to be with this person. And that is very tricky, of course. It's one thing to bring up polyamory in theory, but it's really different when it's not theoretical and there's actually a person there waiting on the wings. Ooh, talk about putting the pressure on your mate. That's very, very difficult. And it's I really feel for the husband. His reaction was, my God, I've married you. We've built this life together. How can I not be enough for you? How can you tell me that I'm not enough for you? And, I'm poly. They both came to me, to Great Answer myself, to ask for advice. And even though I'm polyamorous, I felt for him, because it's a really tough thing to hear. And that's one thing. If you're the person bringing this up in the relationship, you got to understand how hard it is for the other person to hear, and all the insecurities and things that this is going to be bringing up. So, I will say that they are very happily polyamorous right now. I tell you, I did not think that they were going to make it, quite frankly, because she was very defensive and you can't tell me what to do, this is how I am. And he was very much I don't understand why I'm not enough for you. Both of which I think are very understandable and very common reactions. But they had to talk through those. And of course, every time they talked about it, they fought. Oh, that's a little heads up. Yeah, when you bring this up in the relationship, every time you talk about it, you're probably going to fight and somebody's going to end up crying. But there's a possibility that if you do all the fighting and the crying, that you can finally get to a point. Right now, they're very happily polyamorous, and they're doing it pretty well. But it took a lot of dealing with the insecurities and the discomfort and the fighting. Oh, the fighting. Boy, did they fight before they got to that place. Now, the next letter, is that all nice and happy? I'm like, yeah, go fight for a couple of years and see if that helps. What do I know? The minx would never give advice. Laugh Girl wrote in about a situation in which the couple decided they were not poly and that it wouldn't work, and it breaks my heart to hear this. She writes, I'm a person who's been in a previous polyamorous relationship with a couple, dear friends of mine, who were experimenting with the concept. Of course, it didn't work out. And I will just insert here, please don't say of course, sometimes it does work out. And we all realized we jumped into the sexual aspect way too quickly without enough communication and foresight. Many people's feelings were hurt, and it's taken a couple of years to heal. In the meantime, the husband still feels polyamorous, and his wife is not, although she is open as a couple to swinging male only. The husband and I, the friend, are very good friends and also love each other deeply. The wife sometimes feels threatened by his and our friendship, but sometimes accepts our friendship and even states that I'm part of their family. Because of her vulnerability, her husband, rightly so, tries to take care of her and secure her in their relationship. His interpretation of what that means is that we can't be around each other for a while. For me, it feels like an ebb and flow of rejection, and it's hard to see that sometimes just regular friends of theirs get more social contact than I do. I understand their need to connect, but how can she feel comfortable with our friendship if she sees that it's still not threatening in times of vulnerability on her part? Maybe I'm being selfish, I don't know. So my question is, do you feel from the wife's perspective that it's important that I stay away in times of vulnerability? I would never in a million years want them to separate. I love with all my heart their children, the wife, the husband, and want to do anything to help heal their relationship. However, I'm not sure we're going about it in the best way possible. I can't imagine being a husband who feels polyamorous and a wife who doesn't feel that way and sees that her husband and a good friend of theirs admire and love each other deeply. Do you have any suggestions for healing? Is time apart a good thing? Who knows? But then again, maybe we're doing the right thing and the healing process is just a bitch. Wow, that's quite a question, Laugh Girl. And first of all, my heart goes out to you. You are in an incredibly difficult position. But, I mean, first of all, give yourself and your lover and your lover's wife credit for doing some things very, very well. You pointed out that you realized that you jumped into it way too quickly and without enough communication and foresight. So you realized what the problem was, and everyone is acknowledging that. That in itself is great. A couple of things I can comment on. I really don't know what to tell you because I'm not in the relationship, and only you and your lover and your lover's wife know what's right for you. But you pointed out that because of the wife's vulnerability, her husband, rightly so, tries to take care of her and secure her in their relationship. I think it's great and very sweet that he does that. But we need to point out that the only person who can secure someone in a relationship is that person. She is the only person who can help her. She is the only one who can feel secure about that relationship. It's not his job to make her feel secure, not your job to make her feel secure. It's her job to do this self-exploration and examine the insecurity and find whatever it takes for her to feel secure. So when I emailed Laugh Girl back, what I asked her was, have you and the wife sat down? Have you guys talked to each other openly, just as people, just as let's just talk about this? Because I know that what bothers me, being in a kind of similar situation in that I came into an already existing couple, what really bothered me, and still does quite frankly, is feeling excluded in the decision-making process and feeling rejected and feeling, left out of the family and left out of decisions in the family. And, I'm not saying this could fix things or make things the way that you want. I really think it's great that you realize that this is a healing process and that, you may never get that, sexual relationship that you want, and it may end up being simply an intimate friendship. I think it's great that you recognize that, which I know is a very, very difficult thing to recognize. But I suggested, you talking to the wife just as friends, just as, finding out what, sharing your insecurities with her, and listening to what her insecurities are. I'm not saying it would solve anything, but at least it might help you heal, because it could help you understand better where you are emotionally and with in terms of insecurities. It can also help you understand where she is in terms of insecurities. Yeah, I know. Talk, communicate, open and honest, blah, 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 blah. I really hope that you go through the healing process and that you find a place where all three of you can talk and be honest about your feelings. I have to be honest, it sounds like you're doing really great work, but it still hurts. And that's the sucky part, is you can do all the communication and dealing with insecurities and feelings, and it still hurts sometimes. It's still gonna hurt. So I'm sorry, I really can't help laugh, girl. Our next topic, swinging versus polyamory. We've talked about this in a previous podcast, but I just got my hands on this fabulous, it's not really an article, it's actually the notes from a presentation that Peppermint gave at the Building Bridges conference in October of '04. I really hope we are going to be interviewing at some point in September. We both have schedules that don't allow it right away, but it's an incredibly thorough document available through his live journal. It was the July 7th entry of his live journal, which I believe is open to the public, and I will put a link to that on the show notes page. But the part that I wanted to bring up was the way polyamorous react when you call them swingers. He talks about identity in this article. Actually, it's under the category behavioral distinctions. And he says, poly people faced with the question, oh, so you're just swingers, usually come up with a no answer and then try to distance themselves from swinging. And usually they do this by attempting to define swinging and polyamory in such a way that they're clearly distinct. Unfortunately, they're extremely difficult to distinguish this way. I have included some common tactics here, along with some rebuttals that illustrate the kind of murkiness we're dealing with. Okay, and one response he says, or one tactic he suggests is, swinging is about sex, polyamory is about love. Plenty, though not all, poly people will tell you that actually polyamory is about sex as well as love. In some ways, sex is where the rubber of polyamory really hits the road, because monogamy is defined sexually in our culture. In opposition to monogamy, polyamory is almost required to definitively include a sexual component. Similarly, at various points in history and in various subgroups, swinging has included love or emotional attachment. This is not a distinction which clearly leaves some people or behaviors on one side and others on the other. Swinging is having sex parties, polyamory is about having relationships. Hey, I keep having sex parties and I'm poly and I'm not a swinger. The people attending my parties are almost entirely poly-identified, so the parties are definitely poly-sex parties. Similarly, swinging couples can form long-term friendships with other couples or singles in a manner that strongly resembles poly-couple dating. Some swingers never go to parties. And really, if we think of relationships as relating over time instead of identifying as in a relationship, it's clear that swingers have relationships. Swinging is just about having fun. Polyamory is serious. I hope most poly people are having fun. And the swingers I've met have all been perfectly serious about what they're doing. Often they're quite committed to swinging to the point of only dating other swingers. Swinging is sexist and or homophobic. Plenty of poly people are sexist and or homophobic. Plenty of swingers and swing scenes are not. And just so you know, I'm only reading, this is an incredibly long document. I'm only picking and choosing the bits that I really related to. So as I shuffle my papers, I'm skipping ahead to identification distinctions. He continues, the easy way to distinguish between swinger and poly people is to focus on identity and community. Swinging and polyamory are two mostly separate communities and two definitively separate communities. Let's start with community-based distinctions. Here's some things that a non-swinger poly person might say. Swinging is a different non-monogamous community that I'm not a member of. I don't consider myself a swinger because I don't spend time with swingers or in the swinger community. Similarly, identification-based responses might be, some poly people are also swingers, I am not one of them. Or, swingers have a valid but different take on non-monogamy than poly people. And later on he says, if poly people can remember that they need not put down swinging while distancing themselves from it, it's pretty easy to do. I've been guilty of this. When somebody asks me, when I, explain to someone what polyamory is to me, recognizing the possibility of multiple long-term loving committed relationships with the full knowledge and consent of all parties involved, someone unfamiliar with the scene will the first thing that tends to come to mind is, oh, so you're a swinger. And I do I crinkle my nose in distaste and say, no, I said polyamory with that little sort of, teenage outburst of air that expresses complete disdain for the questioner. So I've definitely been guilty of this myself. But I like his idea of differentiating not by, and he does have very, very good points, that if you talk about behavioral distinctions, the lines are too fine, because different polyamorous and different swingers definitely act in ways that cross over those distinctions that we make about sex versus love and recreational sex versus relationships. So I think he makes excellent points that you can distinguish them that way, but it's really not a very good way to distinguish the polyamory community versus the swinger community, especially if you're going to refer to the swinger community with disdain, which really just isn't cool. I like the suggestion of saying the swinger community, for example, I would be comfortable saying something like, well, the swinger community is very active in this area. I'm not familiar with it because I'm a member of the polyamorous community, which of course will, probably engender the question, well, what's the difference? What's the polyamorous community? Which you can answer however you like. Hey, direct them to this article. The link will be on the show notes section. Finally, last but not least, Tacit, who once again is the creator of the Zero Mag polyamory site, available at www.xeromag.com, wrote an incredible entry on LiveJournal, which it's a wonderful rant, and I love that he is ranting so that I don't have to. And I'm going to share a couple paragraphs of that with you. The title is Some Thoughts on Being Lucky. Oh, you're so lucky. I hear it all the time, in emails people send me, in conversations, in feedback on my website. Oh, you're so lucky. Why am I so lucky? For reasons that have nothing to do with luck. You have a girlfriend who likes bondage? Oh, you're so lucky. You have more than one partner and everybody is okay with that? Oh, you're so lucky. Oh, you own your own business? You're so lucky. It's profoundly annoying. No, I am not so lucky. I have the partners I have and I live the life I live because I sat down and made conscious, deliberate decisions about the way I want my life to look and the people I want to share it with. Luck has nothing to do with it. I own a business because I chose to start a business and accept the risk that comes along with that. I have the partners I have because these are the people who I've chosen to share my life with, and they are with me because they have chosen to share their lives with me. And Minx will insert here, because you also took the risk of choosing that lifestyle, and you also took the risk, and your partners also took the risk of engaging in this lifestyle that can be very, very difficult, as well as very, very rewarding. I continue with his rant. Oh, you're so lucky. I live with a woman who enjoys being tied up because I share with my partners the things that interest me and the things that I like. I communicate with them and build a foundation of honesty and trust and mutual respect. This is not luck. I have received countless emails from my BDSM website that are variations on one of two themes. I want to try this stuff, but I'm afraid to tell my partner. What should I do? And I've always wanted to try this stuff, but I didn't tell my partner, and after we'd been together for 15 years, he told me that he's always wanted to try it too. Well, see, there you go. If you don't ask for what you want, don't expect to get what you want. Luck isn't going to help you. Of course, a person who does not believe it's possible for him to have something is not going to feel empowered to seek it. I wonder, though, what does he see when he sees other people living the way he wants to live, but still believes it's impossible? What is it that makes him feel so disempowered? Why should these things be accessible to others, but inaccessible to him? Oh, you're so lucky. We make our own luck. I skip ahead. Oh, you're so lucky. It's insulting and baffling at the same time. Insulting because it totally misses the decisions I've made that have made me who I am. Baffling because anybody can make these choices, and indeed people do every day. A person who wants something but chooses not to pursue it turns his back on what he wants, and then is surprised when he doesn't have it. What the fuck? Your life every day is shaped by the choices you make. Don't like the music? Change the tune. I'm like sweating now. That was a great rant. Thank you so much, Tacit. Thank you so much, Tacit, for ranting for me and for letting me read your rant on the air, because I believe this too. I mean, I know that I said it too when I did, have the threesome with Great Dancer and Tristan and had just the most wonderful weekend of my life. I mean, yes, I say that I was lucky, which is a way of saying that I appreciate what I have. But it's true that luck had nothing to do with it. And we pointed that out on the podcast too, that, that was the result of 3 years of work. I'm very picky about my lovers. I don't just go around boffing anybody and having a threesome with anyone. This threesome that I had was meaningful to me because of all the work that we put into it. We put a hell of a lot of work into this lifestyle. I mean, I'm constantly working on my relationship with Great Dancer, on communicating with him about our relationship, our lives, his relationship with Genevieve. I'm having to work my butt off to communicate with Genevieve, which is a challenge because, hey, what do you do when your lover's wife has a different communication style from you? But if I hadn't done all that work, and if Great Dancer and if Genevieve hadn't done all that work and made these active choices in our life, that it was worth it, that we were going to communicate, that we were going to be honest, and that we were going to share all our feelings and communication and blah, 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 all of that stuff, we wouldn't have the absolutely fantabulous, wonderful, polyamorous life that we have today. And on that note, this has been Polyamory Weekly for August 9th, 2005. Questions, comments, feedback, want to rant? Email me, cunningminx, CUNNINGMINX, @gmail.com. Or call the listener comment line, area code 206-600-5677. And remember, guys, it's not all about the sex.